This is not a coincidence, and this is not just another message drifting through your day. Heaven sent me to expose this darkness, and if you feel a tightening in your spirit right now, it is because truth has just entered the room. There are moments when heaven interrupts time, when God pulls back the curtain not to frighten you, but to free you. This is one of those moments. You were not meant to stumble onto this by chance. You were guided here because something hidden has been working against you, quietly, consistently, and spiritually. What you thought with love was not always love. What you trusted was not always safe, and what you could not explain was not imagined. Heaven has seen it all. There is a weight many of you have been carrying that you could never fully name. You tried harder, prayed longer, waited patiently, yet things kept stalling. Doors almost opened and then slammed shut. Relationships drained you instead of strengthening you. Your name, your identity, your efforts felt resisted, as if something invisible kept canceling your progress. That is not because you are weak, unlucky, or unworthy. It is because there had been opposition hiding in plain sight. The person you thought loved you had been working against you, not always consciously, but spiritually. Sometimes darkness does not announce itself with cruelty. Sometimes it smiles, agrees, supports you outwardly, and undermines you inwardly. Heaven is exposing this now because the season has shifted. You are too close to breakthrough to remain unaware. There are moments when God allows delay not as punishment, but as protection, because exposure before maturity can be dangerous. But now, the time of concealment is over. The next 5 days matter more than you realize. This is not symbolic. This is not poetic language. This is a real spiritual window, a narrow passage of time in which authority is being handed back to you. What has been attached to your name can be broken, but only if you respond. A spiritual curse on a name does not always look dramatic. It often looks like patterns, repeated disappointments, cycles of betrayal, constant misunderstanding, being close to victory yet never holding it. It looks like being chosen yet always contested. And here's the hardest truth. These things often gain access through emotional proximity, through trust, through shared space, through words spoken by someone who once had permission to speak into your life. That is why this revelation hurts, but it also heals. Because what is exposed can no longer hide. Heaven sent me to tell you that God has heard every silent cry you buried under strength. He saw the nights you questioned yourself, wondering if you were the problem. You were not. You were targeted because of what you carry. Darkness does not waste energy on empty vessels. It resists destiny. And the reason this message feels intense is because time is involved. There is urgency here, not panic, but precision. The next 5 days are not about fear. They are about decision, about alignment, about choosing truth over comfort and obedience over familiarity. Right now, something is stirring in your spirit because deep down, you already sense this. You notice the subtle discouragement, the passive resistance, the way your light was tolerated but never celebrated. You ignored it because you wanted peace, harmony, love. Heaven understands that. But now heaven is asking you to choose clarity. Because peace built on blindness is fragile, and love that competes with your destiny is not love sent from God. This exposure is not meant to isolate you. It is meant to protect you. God is not removing people to punish you. He is removing access to preserve what He placed inside you. And in the next 5 days, your words, your prayers, your decisions will carry unusual weight. What you renounce will loosen. What you declare will shift. What you tolerate will remain. This is why this message found you now and not later. Delay would have cost more than you know. Listen carefully. You are not cursed beyond hope. You are not trapped. You are not powerless. But you are responsible. Heaven will not break what you continue to agree with. That is why awareness is the first weapon. Today, your eyes are opening. Today, confusion is lifting. Today, the fog is thinning. And as uncomfortable as this truth may feel, it is the mercy of God in action. You ought rush away from this moment. Let it settle. Let the truth breathe. Let your spirit recognize what your mind tried to rationalize away. Because what comes next is not exposure alone, but instruction. And what is about to be revealed will explain everything you could never put into words. What makes this revelation so unsettling is not the darkness itself, but where it was hiding. Darkness is easier to confront when it looks like an enemy. But when it wears the face of someone familiar, someone close, someone you trusted with your thoughts, your plans, even your prayers, it becomes far more dangerous. That is why heaven is addressing this now. The person you thought loved you was not always acting with malicious intent, yet spiritually, they became a channel of resistance. This is not about hatred or blame. This is about understanding how opposition often enters quietly, through access rather than attack. Many of you sensed it but dismissed it. You felt drained after conversations. You noticed subtle discouragement whenever you shared vision or progress. Your joy was met with silence. Your faith was met with doubt disguised as concern. You told yourself they were just being realistic, just protective, just cautious. But over time, their words began shaping your decisions. Your reactions began influencing your confidence. This is how spiritual opposition works when it hides behind affection. It does not push you off the path all at once. It nudges you slightly, repeatedly, until you look up and wonder why you feel so far from who you were meant to be. The hardest part is admitting that love and opposition can exist in the same relationship. Scripture has always revealed this pattern. Betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from proximity, from shared meals, from trusted circles. That does not mean the person is entirely evil. It means that somewhere along the way, unresolved jealousy, insecurity, fear, or spiritual blindness created an opening. Darkness exploits openings. It attaches itself to emotions left unchecked. And when someone has consistent access to your life, their words carry weight in the spiritual realm. This is why you must not rush to confront or accuse. Exposure is not the same as reaction. Heaven is not calling you to chaos. Heaven is calling you to clarity. Right now, your task is discernment. To see without hatred. To understand without bitterness. Because once you see clearly, the power dynamic changes. Darkness loses leverage the moment it is identified. The confusion you felt was not weakness. It was your spirit detecting inconsistency between words and spiritual posture. There is also a reason you struggled to separate emotionally. Familiarity creates loyalty, and loyalty can become a trap when it overrides truth. You stayed longer than you should have. You explained away red flags. You carried guilt for wanting distance. Heaven does not condemn you for that. God understands the human need for connection. But now, connection must be filtered through purpose. Anyone assigned to walk with you must be able to celebrate your growth without shrinking themselves or you. This message is not meant to isolate you from everyone. It is meant to teach you how to guard your inner circle. Not everyone who claps for you is for you, and not everyone who is silent is neutral. Spiritual alignment matters more than emotional history. And in this season, God is teaching you that access to your life is a privilege, not a right. As you listen, something is beginning to make sense. Moments replaying in your mind. Comments that felt small but linger. Decisions you postponed because you felt unsure. That uncertainty did not originate from God. Heaven does not lead through confusion. When love consistently produces fear, hesitation, or self-doubt, something is misaligned. Love sent from God strengthens clarity, not clouds it. And now hear this carefully. This revelation is not about cutting people off recklessly. It is about repositioning your heart, about removing emotional dependency from places where spiritual support was lacking, about taking your authority back without announcing it to everyone. Silence, in this season, is wisdom. Observation is power. Prayer is strategy. This is also why engagement matters right now. When you respond to truth, you align yourself with it. If this message is resonating, do not stay passive. Take a moment to like this video, not for a number, but as an act of agreement. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, because what is being released here is part of a larger unfolding that will guide you through this window. And in the comments, write one sentence declaring clarity over your life. Your words matter more than you realize. Heaven is gathering those who are ready to see clearly, to walk wisely, and to stop bleeding energy into places that were never meant to sustain them. You are not losing love. You are gaining truth. And truth, though uncomfortable at first, always leads to freedom. What you are stepping into requires stronger boundaries, sharper discernment, and a deeper trust in God than in people. As this part closes, allow yourself to sit with this understanding. Do not rush to conclusions, but do not retreat back into denial. The mask has been identified, the confusion as a source. And what comes next will show you exactly how to respond without fear, without guilt, and without losing your peace. What you are about to understand now is not meant to frighten you, but to empower you. A spiritual curse on a name does not begin with fire or shadows. It begins quietly, subtly, almost invisibly. It often starts with words spoken in emotional moments, words fueled by jealousy, bitterness, disappointment, or unresolved wounds. Names carry identity, authority, and assignment. In Scripture, names were never random. They represented calling, destiny, and spiritual position. When something attaches itself to a name, it seeks to interfere with all three. Many of you have wondered why things seem harder for you than for others who work less, pray less, or prepare less. You watched opportunities slip away at the last moment. You noticed that when momentum built, resistance intensified. This was not coincidence. The curse on a name works by creating friction between effort and outcome. You sow, but the harvest delays. You move, but the ground resists. Over time, this creates exhaustion and self-doubt, which is exactly what darkness wants. Not to destroy you instantly, but to wear you down slowly. How did it begin? Often through agreement. Agreement does not always look like consent. Sometimes it looks like silence, like staying connected to words that belittled you, like tolerating jokes that minimize your calling, like internalizing criticism that was never meant to shape you. When someone with access to your heart speaks from a place of envy or fear, and those words are not rejected, they linger, they settle, they echo. And in the spiritual realm, repetition becomes structure. You did not imagine the heaviness around your name. You felt it when people misunderstood you without reason, when your intentions were questioned, when your character was challenged unfairly. These are classic signs of an identity-based attack. Darkness attacks names because names unlock doors. If the enemy can distort how your name is perceived, he can delay where it is welcomed. But hear this clearly. A curse can only remain where there is ignorance or agreement. Awareness begins the breaking. This is why heaven is revealing the root, not just the fruit. You have been trying to fix outcomes, but God is addressing the source. The curse did not start because you were weak. It started because you were significant. There was something about your future that provoked attention. Something about your growth that triggered insecurity in someone close. And whether they intended harm or not, spiritual laws respond to words, emotions, and access. Right now, as you listen, you may feel a mix of relief and grief. Relief because things finally make sense. Grief because the realization involves someone you cared about. Both emotions are valid. But do not stay in grief. This revelation is not the end of a story. It is the turning point. The authority to break what attached itself to your name was always yours. You simply needed to see it. And now comes the urgency. The next 5 days are critical because exposure creates a time window. When darkness is exposed, it attempts to either flee or reassert itself. This is why heaven is calling you to be intentional. What you do next matters. What you speak matters. What you allow in your emotional space matters. This is not about fighting people. This is about reclaiming your spiritual ground. Here is your first blessing ritual, and it is not symbolic. It is an act of alignment. Type "My name is redeemed" in the comments if this message is resonating with your spirit. Blessing code 814 is now activated. As you do this, you are making a public declaration that your identity no longer agrees with hidden opposition. Before we move forward, let me say this clearly. Do not rush ahead mentally. What comes next builds on this foundation. Stay present. Stay open. Because what is about to be revealed will show you how to step fully into freedom, and you will be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed. As this truth settles in your spirit, I feel led to speak directly to those whose hearts are burning right now. When you support this mission, you are not supporting a channel. You are helping light reach souls who are still trapped in confusion and silence. I hear the Lord saying, as you sow into this ground, I will cause rivers to rise where drought once lived. This word goes forward because faithful hands make room for it to travel. And I say this personally, from my heart to yours. Your obedience in this moment carries weight beyond what you see. Do not delay what heaven is prompting. Activate super thanks, join this channel through membership, or release your seed through PayPal. The link is waiting in the description, and the QR code is appearing before you now. Step forward and obey. By now, something deep within you has shifted. Not because you were persuaded, but because recognition has taken place. Truth has a way of resonating before it is understood. What heaven is revealing to you is not built on assumption or emotion. It is supported by evidence that has been present in your life for a long time. Patterns are heaven's receipts. And when you begin to look back with spiritual clarity, you will see that this exposure was inevitable. Think carefully about the delays that never made sense. The opportunities that appeared promising, only to collapse at the last moment without clear explanation. The relationships that began with intensity but ended in confusion. The cycles where you would regain strength, only to feel suddenly drained again. These were not random occurrences. Coincidence does not repeat with precision, but spiritual interference does. Heaven allowed these patterns to continue only long enough for you to recognize them without being destroyed by them. There were moments when God tried to warn you quietly. through unease in your spirit, through conversations that left you unsettled, through dreams you could not forget. You brushed them aside because the source of discomfort did not match your expectations. You assumed danger would look obvious. But spiritual danger often arrives disguised as normalcy. That is why discernment is not dramatic. It is subtle, persistent, and patient. This is also why others may not understand what you are realizing now. They did not live inside your cycles. They did not feel the internal resistance every time you tried to rise. Heaven does not require public validation to confirm divine truth. God confirms His word through alignment, not applause. And right now, your spirit is aligning with what your mind once resisted. Notice how this message reached you at a moment of transition. You were already questioning certain connections, already feeling the need to protect your peace, already sensing that something had to change. This is how heaven works. Revelation rarely interrupts with a preparation. God prepares the heart before He exposes the truth. That is mercy. If this had been revealed too early, you would have dismissed it. Too late, and the cost would have been greater. Look back at the timing of certain losses. Some things fell apart right before they could harm you further. Some relationships ended abruptly, leaving you confused but strangely lighter. Some doors closed with force, but spared you from long-term damage. At the time, you grieved what you thought you lost. Now you are beginning to understand what you were spared from. Protection does not always feel gentle. Sometimes it feels like disruption. Heaven is also showing you that your resistance was strongest when your calling grew louder. Every time you stepped closer to purpose, opposition intensified. That is not accidental. Darkness responds to movement. It does not attack stagnant lives with urgency. It reacts to those who are advancing. This is why your life felt like a battlefield at moments when you were simply trying to grow. You were not imagining the pressure. You were encountering it. Another piece of evidence lies in how often you were misunderstood. Your intentions were questioned. Your silence was misinterpreted. Your boundaries were challenged. This is what happens when someone's spirit resists your elevation. They may not consciously know why, but they feel threatened by what they cannot control. And rather than confront their own insecurity, they project it onto you. Heaven saw every moment you chose peace over explanation, and heaven honors restraint. This revelation is also coming now because you are strong enough to carry it. God does not reveal truth to overwhelm. He reveals it to equip. You are no longer the person you were when this interference began. You have matured. You have learned to hear God's voice more clearly. You have survived what once would have broken you. That is why exposure now brings clarity, not collapse. Do not minimize what you are understanding. This is not paranoia. This is discernment awakening. And discernment does not accuse. It observes. It does not react emotionally. It responds spiritually. Heaven is not asking you to relive the past. It is asking you to reinterpret it. Because when you reinterpret your history through truth, shame loses its grip. Right now, heaven is building your confidence, not in people, but in God's ability to lead you accurately. You are learning that discomfort is sometimes instruction, that confusion can be a signal, that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of alignment. And alignment is exactly what this season is about. As you move forward, remember this: coincidence fades under scrutiny, but truth grows stronger the more it is examined. What is being revealed to you has survived every attempt to stay hidden. That alone tells you it is time. And as the picture becomes clearer, you will soon understand not only what happened, but how to move forward without carrying bitterness, fear, or regret. This is the part many people struggle to accept, not because it is unclear, but because it is close. When heaven reveals that a person you trusted has been working against you, the mind looks for escape routes. It wants another explanation, a softer reason, something less personal. But clarity does not always come gently. Sometimes it comes precisely because precision is what frees you. This is not about accusing someone of intentional harm. It is about recognizing spiritual positioning. Someone can care about you emotionally and still resist you spiritually. The person working against you did not wake up one day and decide to oppose your destiny. More often, it began internally. Comparison, insecurity, feeling left behind as you grew, watching your confidence increase while their own sense of purpose weakened. These emotions, when left unaddressed, become breeding grounds for spiritual interference. Darkness does not always need permission from someone's mind. It only needs access through unresolved emotions, and proximity provides that access. This is why their behavior felt inconsistent. Supportive one moment, dismissive the next. Encouraging publicly, discouraging privately. Curious about your progress, but strangely distant when you succeeded. These contradictions were not random. They were signals. Your spirit noticed them long before your logic did. You felt uneasy after certain interactions but told yourself you were overthinking. You were not. Discernment often whispers before it speaks clearly. It is important to understand that this person may not fully understand what they are doing. Spiritual resistance does not always come with awareness. Sometimes people become conduits for opposition simply because they refuse to confront their own wounds. When someone feels threatened by your growth, they may subconsciously try to slow it down to protect their sense of stability. This is not justification. It is explanation. And explanation brings peace because it removes confusion. You must also release the idea that love automatically equals alignment. Love without healing can become controlling. Love mixed with fear can become limiting. Love influenced by jealousy can become harmful. Heaven is teaching you that alignment matters more than affection when it comes to destiny. Not everyone who loves you is meant to walk with you into your next season. Some people are assigned to a chapter, not the entire book. This realization does not require confrontation. In fact, confrontation in this season would likely create unnecessary conflict. Exposure does not mean announcement. Wisdom often looks like quiet adjustment, like changing how much access someone has to your thoughts, your plans, your emotions, like no longer seeking validation from places that cannot celebrate you without comparison. Distance, when guided by God, is not punishment. It is protection. You may feel guilt rising as you consider this. That is normal. You were conditioned to prioritize loyalty, to be understanding, to give grace endlessly. Grace is holy, but it is not permission for continued harm. God never asks you to sacrifice your calling on the altar of someone else's comfort. Boundaries are not unloving. They are truthful. And truth is the foundation of every healthy connection. Heaven is also reminding you that discernment is not suspicion. You are not being called to see enemies everywhere. You are being called to see accurately. Discernment does not breed fear. It produces a peace. When you begin to reposition yourself emotionally, you will notice a shift. Conversations will feel lighter. Your energy will stabilize. Your clarity will increase. These are confirmations, not coincidences. Another sign you are identifying the right source is emotional relief. Even if sadness is present, there is a sense of inner calm. Confusion decreases. Self-doubt loosens its grip. You stop rehearsing conversations in your mind. That mental noise fades when alignment returns. Your spirit recognizes when it is no longer under pressure. This part of the process also requires forgiveness, not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve freedom. Forgiveness does not mean restoring access. It means releasing emotional hooks. You can forgive someone and still move forward without them. Forgiveness closes spiritual doors that resentment would keep open. Heaven wants you unburdened, not bitter. As you step into this understanding, resist the urge to explain yourself to everyone. Not everyone will understand your shift. Not everyone needs to. Obedience often looks strange to those who cannot see what you see. God is not calling you to be understood. He is calling you to be aligned. This season is about quiet strength, about observing without absorbing, about loving without losing yourself. The person who was working against you does not define your future. They were a chapter, not the conclusion. And now that the interference has been identified, the hold it once had is weakening. What matters now is not who opposed you, but how you move forward with wisdom. The next phase will teach you how to protect what God is restoring without closing your heart completely. Balance is coming. Clarity is increasing. And soon, you will feel the weight lift in ways you cannot yet explain, only recognize. What you are standing in right now is not just a season. It is a window. Windows open and close. They are not permanent, and they are not meant to be feared, but they must be respected. Heaven does not operate in randomness. When God assigns a time frame, it is because something specific is available within it. The next 5 days are not a threat hanging over you. They are an invitation extended to you. An invitation to act with awareness, intention, and spiritual authority. In Scripture, time windows often appeared at moments of transition. There were days when manna fell and days when it stopped. Moments where the door of the ark was open and moments when it was shut. These were not acts of cruelty, but of order. God honors timing because timing protects purpose. What heaven is offering you now is a concentrated period of grace, where insight, obedience, and decision carry amplified impact. This 5-day window exists because exposure has already taken place. Once darkness is revealed, it must either be confronted or it will attempt to relocate. Exposure destabilizes hidden systems. That is why the enemy often intensifies confusion after truth surfaces. But heaven, in its mercy, does not leave you uncovered. God provides a window where clarity is sharp, discernment is heightened, and your voice carries weight in the spiritual realm. During these 5 days, you may notice heightened sensitivity. You will feel more aware of what drains you and what restores you. Conversations may feel heavier or clearer than usual. Your spirit will respond quickly to alignment or misalignment. This is not emotional instability. This is spiritual alertness. Pay attention to what brings peace without explanation. Pay attention to what disturbs you without reason. These signals are part of the instruction. This window is not about frantic action. It is about intentional alignment. Heaven is not asking you to fix everything in 5 days. God is asking you to decide. To choose truth over comfort, obedience over avoidance, clarity over denial. Decisions made in this window will echo far beyond it. Small choices now will prevent large battles later. One of the most important things to understand is that this window will not look dramatic from the outside. You may still go to work, still speak to the same people, still live your routine. But internally, shifts are happening. Agreements are being broken. Authority is being reclaimed. When you choose not to engage in conversations that diminish you, something breaks. When you refuse to internalize subtle negativity, something loosens. When you pray with clarity instead of confusion, something realigns. Heaven is also cautioning you not to seek validation during this time. This window is about obedience, not consensus. If you wait for everyone to understand your decisions, you may miss the moment. Some instructions from God only make sense after you obey them. Faith often requires movement before explanation. Trust that God sees the full picture, even when you only see the next step. You may also feel a pull toward stillness, a desire to withdraw slightly, to reflect, to pray more intentionally. Under that, silence is not emptiness. It is space for instruction. This is not the time to over-explain or overexpose your process. Protect your inner world. What is forming there is fragile and powerful at the same time. Another key aspect of this window is renouncement. This does not mean dramatic declarations shouted into the air. It means quietly withdrawing agreement from anything that contradicts God's truth about you. Renouncing old labels, renouncing self-doubt, renouncing emotional dependency on approval, renouncing guilt for choosing yourself. These internal acts carry spiritual authority because they are rooted in truth. If you ignore this window, heaven does not abandon you. God is patient, but patterns may take longer to break. Lessons may repeat. Resistance may persist. Not as punishment, but as consequence. Timing affects ease. Obedience now reduces struggle later. This is why heaven is speaking so clearly. You are being offered a smoother path, not an easier calling. You may also notice that distractions increase during this time. Old conversations resurface. Familiar people seek attention. Emotional triggers appear. This is not coincidence. Distraction is one of the oldest strategies used to pull people away from decisive moments. Awareness disarms it. You do not need to react to everything that appears. Choose what deserves your energy. As these 5 days unfold, remember this. You are not racing against time, you are aligning with it. God is not pressuring you. He is partnering with you. Heaven has already done its part by revealing the truth. Now it is your turn to respond with faith, wisdom, and courage. This window exists because you are ready. Not perfect, but ready. Strong enough to see clearly. Wise enough to choose differently. Humble enough to listen. What you do with this time will shape the next chapter of your life. And as you move forward, you will begin to sense that something old is loosening its grip, making room for something new to take its place. Now that the exposure has happened and the window has been revealed, heaven does not leave you guessing about what comes next. God is not a revealer of problems without being a giver of solutions. What you are stepping into now is strategy. Not human strategy driven by emotion, but heaven's strategy rooted in authority. The breaking of what attached itself to your name does not require force, panic, or confrontation. It requires alignment. Darkness loses power when authority is exercised correctly. The first part of heaven's strategy is restoration of ownership. A curse only survives where ownership has been blurred. Somewhere along the way, you allowed others' words, opinions, or emotions to weigh more than God's truth about you. That was not rebellion. It was vulnerability. But now, God is restoring full ownership of your identity back into your hands. You are reclaiming the right to define who you are, not based on history, but on calling. Breaking a curse begins internally before it ever manifests externally. This is why God is focusing on your agreement system. What do you agree with when you are alone? What do you silently repeat to yourself? What conclusions did you draw about yourself during seasons of delay? These internal narratives matter. Heaven's strategy is to replace inherited lies with spoken truth. Not once, but consistently. Truth spoken repeatedly becomes a spiritual structure stronger than any word spoken against you. Another key part of this strategy is separation, but not the kind most people think of. This is not about cutting people off dramatically. It is about separating emotionally, spiritually, and mentally from what no longer aligns. You stop seeking approval where it was never meant to be given. You stop sharing vision with those who cannot carry it without comparison. You stop revisiting conversations that God already gave you peace about. This quiet separation removes access. And when access is removed, influence fades. Heaven is also instructing you to cleanse your spiritual environment. This includes the media you consume, the conversations you entertain, and the habits you tolerate. A curse thrives in clutter. Cluttered thoughts, cluttered emotions, cluttered environments. Order disrupts darkness. When you choose peace intentionally, you are not being passive. You are exercising authority. Peace is not weakness. It is evidence of alignment. Prayer in this season shifts from pleading to declaring. You are no longer asking God to do what He has already authorized you to do. You are declaring what aligns with His will. Declaring clarity. Declaring freedom. Declaring that your name is no longer a battleground, but a testimony. These declarations are not emotional outbursts. They are legal statements in the spiritual realm. And heaven responds to alignment with action. Another part of heaven's strategy is forgiveness. But this must be understood correctly. Forgiveness is not excusing behavior. It is canceling spiritual debt. When you forgive, you are not saying what happened was acceptable. You are saying it no longer has power over you. Unforgiveness keeps doors open. Forgiveness closes them. And when doors close, curses lose pathways. You are also being taught restraint. Not everything you know needs to be spoken. Not every revelation needs to be explained. Silence is a shield in this season. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop feeding unnecessary resistance. God is your defender. He does not need your constant clarification. Trust that what is meant to stand will stand without your justification. One of the most powerful aspects of heaven's strategy is consistency. Darkness is patient, but truth is persistent. Do not underestimate small daily choices. Choosing to pray instead of overthink. Choosing to rest instead of replay. Choosing to speak life instead of rehearse offense. These choices compound. Over time, they dismantle structures that took years to build. Heaven is also reintroducing joy into your life, not as a reward, but as a weapon. Joy disrupts heaviness. It breaks cycles of introspection and self-blame. When you allow yourself to experience joy without guilt, you are signaling that the season of mourning is ending. Joy does not deny pain. It declares that pain does not have the final word. As you implement this strategy, you may notice subtle resistance. Old thoughts trying to resurface. Familiar emotions seeking attention. This does not mean nothing is changing. It means change is working. Resistance often increases right before release. Stay steady. Stay grounded. Do not interpret temporary discomfort as failure. Remember, heaven's strategy is not complicated, but it is intentional. It requires your participation, not perfection. God is not measuring your performance. He is honoring your posture. A willing heart aligned with truth is enough to dismantle what once seemed immovable. As this strategy unfolds, you will begin to notice a shift. Less heaviness, more clarity, less confusion, more confidence. These are signs that authority is returning to its rightful place. Your name is being cleared. Your identity is being restored. And what once worked against you is losing its grip, not because you fought harder, but because you aligned deeper. This is the moment where things begin to change, not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. Every spiritual battle has a turning point, a moment when what once had power begins to weaken. You may not see fireworks. You may not feel instant relief. But something irreversible starts happening here. Darkness loses its grip not when it is exposed, but when it is no longer fed. And right now, you are starving it of access. The turning point does not come with chaos. It comes with calm. A strange calm that does not depend on circumstances. You begin to notice that situations which once triggered anxiety no longer hold the same weight. Conversations that once drained you feel distant, almost irrelevant. Thoughts that used to spiral now pass through without settling. This is not numbness. This is freedom beginning to settle in. One of the clearest signs that darkness is losing its grip is emotional neutrality toward what once controlled you. You are no longer trying to prove anything. No longer rehearsing explanations in your mind. No longer seeking closure from people who were never meant to give it. That inner shift is not accidental. It is the result of authority being reclaimed. When authority returns, chaos retreats. You may also notice that clarity sharpens. Decisions that once felt complicated now feel simple. Not always easy, but simple. You know what aligns and what does not. You know when to engage and when to withdraw. Discernment no longer feels heavy. It feels natural. Like vision returning after a long fog. This is the sign that your spiritual senses are recalibrating. Another powerful indicator of the turning point is rest. Real rest. Not just physical sleep, but mental and emotional rest. A constant internal dialogue quiets down. You are no longer arguing with yourself about what you should tolerate. Peace begins to take up more space. And peace is not passive. Peace is evidence that things are being reordered correctly. Do not be surprised if people sense the shift before you announce anything. When spiritual authority returns, others feel it. Some will respond with respect, others with distance. Both are confirmations. Alignment always rearranges relationships. Not because you changed your personality, but because you changed your position. You are no longer accessible in the same way, and that is by design. This turning point is also marked by release. Release of guilt. Release of false responsibility. Release of the need to rescue others at the expense of yourself. You begin to understand that it was never your job to fix everyone. Your assignment was to obey God and protect what He entrusted to you. That realization alone breaks years of unnecessary burden. Heaven is also restoring your confidence, but not the loud kind. This is quiet confidence. The kind that does not seek validation. The kind that does not need to announce boundaries. You simply move differently. You respond differently. And because of that, life begins to respond differently to you. At this stage, you may feel moments of sadness mixed with relief. That is normal. You are grieving what you hoped things would be, while embracing what they truly are. Let that process happen without judgment. Grief does not mean you made the wrong choice. It means you cared. And caring deeply does not disqualify you from walking wisely. Now is the second blessing ritual, and it is meant to seal this turning point. Type "I step into freedom" in the comments if you feel this shift happening within you. Blessing code 492 is now activated. This is a declaration that what once held you no longer has authority over your future. As you move forward, stay attentive but not anxious. The work is happening even when you are not actively thinking about it. Trust the process. Trust the timing. Trust the God who revealed the truth and is now walking you through the restoration. And hold on. What comes next brings everything together in a way you may not be expecting. As this turning point settles in your spirit, I want you to understand something sacred. When you support this work, you are not funding content. You are helping release light into places still bound by silence and confusion. I hear the Lord saying, "Those who pour oil in this hour will never lack it." This message is reaching lives because faithful people choose to respond when heaven stirs their heart. And I speak this personally to you now. Your obedience in giving is part of your breakthrough, not separate from it. Activate Super Thanks, step into membership, or release your seed through PayPal. The link is waiting in the description, and the QR code is appearing now. Do not delay. Move as the Spirit leads and watch what God does next. Exposure changes everything, but it does not end everything. Once darkness has been identified and its grip begins to loosen, a new responsibility emerges. This is the responsibility of guarding what had been restored. Many people misunderstand this stage and assume the hardest part is over. In reality, this is where wisdom becomes essential. What has been exposed cannot rule you again, but it can attempt to return if boundaries are left unguarded. After exposure, the spiritual atmosphere around you shifts. You are no longer operating in ignorance, and that alone is powerful. But awareness must be protected. This is the phase where subtlety returns, not as deception, but as temptation. The temptation to relax discernment. The temptation to reopen emotional doors out of nostalgia. The temptation to believe that because clarity has come, vigilance is no longer needed. Heaven is reminding you that freedom must be stewarded. Guarding your spirit does not mean living in fear or suspicion. It means living intentionally. You become selective with your energy. You pay attention to how your body and spirit respond to environments, conversations, and connections. You notice when peace leaves the room, and you no longer explain it away. You honor that signal. Discernment is not something you turn on and off. It is something you maintain. One of the most important protections in this season is silence. Not secrecy, but silence. You do not owe everyone an explanation for your growth. Overexposure invites unnecessary opinions. And opinions, even well-meaning ones, can dilute clarity. Guarding your spirit means choosing carefully who has access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves to know what God is doing in you while it is still forming. Another key aspect of guarding your spirit is resisting emotional recycling. Emotional recycling happens when you revisit old conversations, replay past wounds, or mentally rehearse what you wish you had said. This drains energy and reopens doors that heaven already closed. When a thought tries to pull you backward, you gently but firmly redirect it. This is not denial. This is discipline. Discipline protects peace. You may notice that some people attempt to re-enter your emotional space once they sense distance. They may reach out casually. They may reference memories. They may act as if nothing ever happened. This is not always manipulation, but it is a test. Not a test from them, but a test for you. Will you default to old patterns, or will you honor the growth God has produced? You do not need to confront or explain. Your consistency is your answer. Heaven is also teaching you to guard your spirit through gratitude. Gratitude anchors you in the present instead of pulling you into regret. When you acknowledge how far you have come, it becomes harder for old narratives to take hold. Gratitude reminds you that God has been faithful even in confusing seasons, and that remembrance strengthens trust. This is also the stage where boundaries must become habits, not reactions. You no longer wait until you are drained to step back. You step back before depletion occurs. You do not need a dramatic reason to protect your peace. Peace itself is the reason. When something consistently disrupts your alignment, you adjust accordingly. This is maturity, not selfishness. As you guard your spirit, you will notice increased stability, fewer emotional highs and lows, less inner conflict, more grounded confidence. This stability creates space for God to restore what was delayed. Opportunities return. Creativity flows. Rest deepens. These are signs that guarding your spirit is working. This is also a moment to stay connected to voices that reinforce truth. Isolation weakens discernment, but alignment strengthens it. If this message is helping you navigate this season, take a moment to like this video as an act of agreement. Subscribe to the channel so you remain connected to what God is unfolding here. And in the comments, write a simple declaration of protection over your spirit. Your engagement is not passive. It is participatory. Guarding your spirit also means recognizing when joy returns. Joy is a signal that alignment is increasing. Do not suppress it out of caution. Allow yourself to enjoy moments of lightness without guilt. You are not betraying the past by being happy in the present. You are honoring the healing process. As this phase continues, you may feel a growing sense of anticipation, a quiet expectation that something new is forming. That feeling is not random. It is preparation. God often restores momentum after stability is established. You are learning to hold peace without clinging to control, and that posture invites blessing. Stay attentive in this season, not anxious but aware. What you are guarding is not fragile, but it is valuable, and you have learned enough to protect it wisely. Keep moving forward with confidence, because what lies ahead will make it clear why this exposure had to happen first. Restoration after betrayal is not immediate, and it is not shallow. Heaven does not rush this process because what was affected went deeper than circumstances. Betrayal reaches into trust, perception, identity, and expectation. It alters how you see people, how you read situations, and how you guard your heart. That is why God's restoration is intentional and layered. He is not simply fixing what broke. He is rebuilding you in a way that makes you stronger, clearer, and more grounded than before. Many people think restoration means getting back what was lost in the same form. But heaven does not work backward. God works forward with wisdom. What was taken, delayed, or damaged will be restored, but not in the same fragile structure. The restoration you are entering is not about recreating old dynamics. It is about receiving something healthier, more stable, and aligned with who you have become through the process. Betrayal often leaves behind silent questions. You question your judgment. You question your discernment. You question whether you ignored signs you should have seen. God is restoring confidence in your inner voice. Not the voice shaped by fear, but the one refined by experience. You are learning that discernment grows through seasons like this. You are not less discerning because you were betrayed. You are more discerning because you survived it and learned. One of the first signs of restoration is emotional steadiness. You are no longer reacting from raw wounds. Situations that once triggered anger or sadness no longer control your response. This does not mean you forgot what happened. It means the memory no longer governs your emotions. That is healing. When the past loses its emotional authority, the future gains space to form. Heaven is also restoring your sense of worth. Betrayal often makes people internalize rejection, even when it was never about them. God is gently separating your identity from someone else's behavior. You are realizing that what they did was a reflection of their inner condition, not your value. This realization lifts a burden you carried quietly for too long. Another layer of restoration is trust, but it returns differently than before. You are not returning to blind trust. You are stepping into wise trust. Trust that is paired with discernment, boundaries, and self-respect. You no longer give access simply because of history or emotion. You allow access based on consistency, integrity, and alignment. This shift protects your heart without hardening it. God is also restoring your emotional energy. Betrayal is exhausting and drains motivation, creativity, and joy. You may not have noticed how tired you were until the heaviness began to lift. Now, energy is returning. You feel more present, more engaged, more willing to invest in things that nourish you. This is restoration at work. Life begins to feel lighter not because circumstances changed overnight, but because you are no longer carrying unnecessary weight. Another important aspect of restoration is the healing of expectations. You are learning to release unrealistic expectations of people, not in a cynical way, but in a mature one. You no longer expect others to meet needs only God can meet. This adjustment brings freedom. When expectations are aligned correctly, disappointment loses its grip. Heaven is also restoring your ability to hope without fear. After betrayal, hope often feels risky. You guard yourself against disappointment by lowering expectations. God is gently inviting you to hope again, but with wisdom. You are learning that hope rooted in God is not fragile. It does not depend on people behaving perfectly. It depends on God being faithful. You may notice that opportunities begin to appear differently now. Not rushed, not forced. They come with peace, with clarity, with confirmation. This is because restoration includes alignment. When you are aligned internally, external opportunities no longer feel chaotic. They feel appropriate. Time. Great. Relationships also shift during restoration. Some fade naturally. Others deepen unexpectedly. New connections may enter your life that feel calm instead of intense, safe instead of dramatic. These are signs of healthy alignment. God is surrounding you with people who can support your growth without competing with it. Restoration also teaches you to honor yourself. You listen to your limits. You rest without guilt. You say no without over-explaining. These are not signs of selfishness. They are signs of healing. A restored person values their peace because they understand its cost. As restoration continues, you may grieve what could have been. That grief is not a setback. It is part of the healing process. You are releasing a version of the future that was built on incomplete truth. God honors that grief, but He does not want you to live there. What lies ahead is not smaller than what you imagined. It is truer. Understand this clearly. Betrayal did not disqualify you. It refined you. It exposed what needed to be removed and revealed what needed to be strengthened. You are not behind. You are being repositioned. And the restoration unfolding in your life now is not compensation. It is preparation for what is coming next. When a spiritual curse begins to break, it does not always announce itself with dramatic external change. More often, the first signs appear internally, quietly, in ways only you can recognize. This is because true freedom begins within before it manifests outwardly. Heaven dismantles things from the root, not just the surface. And as that dismantling takes place, there are clear, undeniable signs that what once worked against you is losing authority. One of your list signs is peace without explanation. Situations that once caused anxiety no longer carry the same emotional charge. You may still face challenges, but the internal panic is gone. Your reactions are calmer. Your thoughts are clear. This peace does not come from everything being perfect. It comes from alignment. It is the evidence that something oppressive has lifted, even if circumstances have not fully caught up yet. Another sign is the return of clarity. Confusion was one of the strongest indicators that something was interfering with your discernment. Now, decisions feel simpler. Not always easier, but clear. You know when to move forward and when to pause. You no longer second-guess every choice. That mental fog that once made everything feel heavy begins to thin. This clarity is not intellectual alone. It is spiritual. It is your authority returning. You may also notice a shift in how others respond to you. Without trying to change your behavior, dynamics begin to adjust. Some people become more respectful. Others grow distant. Both are signs of realignment. When a curse breaks, spiritual positions shift. You are no longer operating from a place of resistance, and others feel that change, even if they cannot explain it. Another powerful sign is emotional detachment from old triggers. Things that once pulled you into overthinking, sadness, or anger lose their grip. You remember what happened, but it no longer defines how you feel. Memory remains, but emotional control is gone. This is one of the clearest indicators that healing has reached deep levels. When the past can no longer dictate your present, something has truly changed. You may also experience renewed motivation. Projects that felt impossible now feel approachable. Dreams you buried quietly resurface. Creativity returns. This does not happen by force. It happens naturally. Energy begins to flow where stagnation once lived. This is because curses restrict movement, but freedom restores momentum. Another sign is healthy boundaries forming without effort. You no longer struggle to say no. You no longer feel guilt for choosing rest or distance. Boundaries become instinctive rather than forced. This shows that your self-worth is being restored. You are no longer protecting yourself out of fear, but out of wisdom. Pay attention also to your prayer life. It changes. You stop repeating the same desperate prayers. Instead, your prayers become calmer, more declarative, more confident. You are no longer asking God to rescue you from confusion. You are partnering with Him from a place of clarity. That shift is significant. It shows that your posture before God has changed. Another sign the curse is breaking is a renewed sense of hope. Not naive hope, but grounded expectation. You begin to believe again, not because everything looks perfect, but because you trust God's direction more deeply. Hope returns when fear loses authority. This hope feels steady, not fragile. You may also notice physical changes. Better sleep, reduced tension, more consistent energy. The body often reflects what the spirit carries. When spiritual weight lifts, the body responds. Do not ignore these signs. They are confirmations that what you could not see is now being resolved. It is also common to experience moments of gratitude for things you once resented. Not because the pain was good, but because you see what it produced. Perspective shifts. You stop asking why it happened and start understanding how it shaped you. This does not justify harm. It redeems the outcome. Another clear sign is discernment without suspicion. You see clearly without becoming cynical. You trust without being reckless. You observe without absorbing. This balance is rare and powerful. It shows maturity. It shows healing. It shows that wisdom has replaced fear, and these signs appear. Resist the urge to rush the process. Breaking does not mean everything is finished instantly. It means the authority has shifted. What remains now is alignment, catching up with truth. Continue walking in what you have learned. Stay grounded. Stay aware. Most importantly, recognize this truth. If you are seeing these signs, even faintly, it means heaven has already responded. What once felt immovable is being dismantled. What once worked against you is weakening. And what lies ahead will confirm what your spirit already knows. The curse is breaking, and your future is no longer bound by what tried to follow your name. This is where heaven brings closure, not the kind that depends on apologies, explanations, or visible justice, but the kind that settles your spirit and anchors your future. Divine closure does not always rewrite the past, but it redeems its power. What once had authority over your emotions, your thoughts, and your direction no longer does. The season you are stepping into is not defined by what tried to stop you, but by what God preserved in you through it all. Heaven wants you to know this clearly. You were never abandoned in the process. Even in moments when you felt confused, delayed, or alone, God was actively guiding outcomes you could not yet see. Exposure was not the goal. Freedom was, and freedom has now been initiated. What began as pain has been transformed into discernment. What felt like loss has become alignment. What once drained you has now taught you how to protect what matters. Divine closure brings a quiet confidence. You no longer need answers to move forward. You no longer replay moments trying to understand what went wrong. Understanding hath been replaced with peace. That peace is not fragile. It is rooted in truth. And truth has a stabilizing effect. You are no longer standing on shifting ground. You are standing on clarity. God is also assuring you that your name is clean. What was spoken in secret has been overridden by what heaven has declared openly. Your identity is no longer under negotiation. The weight that followed you into rooms is lifting. You will notice it in how you are received, how you speak, and how you move forward. Not because you are trying harder, but because the resistance has lost its authority. This closure does not mean you forget what happened. It means what happened no longer defines your expectations. You are no longer waiting for the past to resolve before allowing the future to unfold. God is not asking you to be fearless. He is asking you to be faithful. Faithful to what you now know. Faithful to the boundaries you have established. Faithful to the peace you fought hard to regain. Heaven is also restoring your vision. You are beginning to see your future without the distortion of fear or disappointment. Plans no longer feel intimidating. Dreams no longer feel unrealistic. You are not rushing ahead, but you are no longer holding back. This balance is the result of healing. It is evidence that you are ready for what comes next. There is also assurance being released over your relationships. God is aligning you with people who will not compete with your calling, diminish your joy, or question your growth. These connections may come slowly, but they will come with peace. They will feel supportive rather than demanding, and they will confirm what God has already been doing internally. As this chapter closes, heaven wants you to release any remaining guilt. Guilt for staying too long. Guilt for not seeing sooner. Guilt for caring deeply. None of those things disqualify you. They reveal your capacity for love and loyalty. Wisdom did not come because you were cold. It came because you were sincere. God honors sincerity. Now comes the final blessing ritual, and it seals everything that has been revealed and restored. Type "My future is clear" in the comments if you are ready to walk forward without the weight of the past. Blessing code 936 is now activated. This is a declaration that your next season will not be shaped by old interference, but by divine direction. Before this message fully concludes, allow this assurance to settle in your spirit. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not recovering anymore. You are realigned. And what God realigns, He protects. The darkness that once worked in hidden ways hath been exposed, aggressed, and stripped of its influence. Walk forward with confidence. Speak with clarity. Choose with wisdom. Heaven has gone before you, and what awaits you will make it clear why this journey had to unfold exactly the way it did. As this prophetic journey comes to a close, I need to speak to you with clarity and authority. What you have received today did not come by accident, and neither does the opportunity before you now. When you give, you are sowing light into lives that are still bound, calling them out of darkness just as you were called. The Lord is saying, "Those who build my altar in this hour will see open heavens in their own." I am speaking to you personally now. This is your moment to respond in obedience, not delay. Release your seed through Super Thanks. Step into membership, or give through PayPal using the link in the description or the QR code on your screen. Move now, and let heaven respond to your obedience.